Hello!
Hello!
It's a special Film Critics Processes. We're live on the scene
We are
of
here.
Chicago
We're here
International
in
Fur Fest. Let's just say we actually flew to Chicago, to Chi-Town.
Yeah, we are here in
and
Chi-Town.
And that we logged onto a computer. We logged onto a computer in Chicago,
so we
could watch these fine region-locked.
We bought some plane tickets, and we're sitting in an internet cafe right now. We had to kick everybody out, and yeah. So now we're.
To be fair, the festival sponsor, Goldman Sachs, did pay for our plane ticket.
Yeah, we're bought and paid for it, baby.
Yeah, they're a huge supporter of the arts. They love,
of course, yeah.
That David Byrne movie that they're playing, that every film festival is pushing for some reason.
I do kind of want to see it, but I also.
It's direct. Oh, Spike Lee directed it.
Yeah, it's.
I did not know that. That's wild.
Yeah, it seems like he's the sequel to Stop Making Sense. Whatever.
I can tell you right now, it's a David Byrne thing. There's absolutely no way that it's not going to be like immediately on some torrenting website
on YouTube.
Like, you probably don't need to go see it through a film festival.
Yeah, but
something you do have to see through a film festival that we went and saw.
Yeah.
Was Careless Crime. Thank you. I was trying to remember what the name of it was.
Careless Crime. Yeah, really, really awesome, interesting movie. We actually just got out of the theater, which is we just barely
just logged out of the theater.
Just barely escaped.
Just closed X on the theater.
Yeah. So it's a movie about movies, ostensibly. Well. More kind of particularly, it is a film out of Iran, which we love Iranian cinema. It's all super cool. There's actually a little shout out to Close Up in this movie.
I was actually going to say, I was literally going to say, it's like in an odd, bring it all back, similar meta film. The Close Up has a little shout out in it near the end of the film. There's a very prominently featured poster for the movie that one of the main characters, I think, kind of like walks back and forth in front of.
Yeah. Which, if you want to hear us talk about Close Up...
I thought was cute.
Yeah, it's awesome. If you want to hear us talk about Close Up, we actually have a Patreon-exclusive Film Critters Throws It Back episode starting at $5 over at patreon.com/filmcritters. Go check it out. But, yeah, this movie was really cool. It's about... it's basically kind of about the... So in 1978, there was this theater fire in Iran that kind of set off... this Iranian revolution of 1979. I think it was 79, actually. The fire in the theater ended up killing about 478 people, something like that.
I've got it up right now. It was the Cinema Rex fire.
Yes.
August 19th, 1978. At least 420, probably more. And the reason it was essentially like a big terrorist moment, like a historical moment, is because the dynasty that was in charge of Iran originally blamed Islamic Marxists, and there's a long shadow cast over this film about the way in which essentially Marxists and leftists were scapegoated, or specifically religious terrorists / leftists were scapegoated for the arson.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so and it ended with like a trial. Three of it was like 4 dudes who set the fire. 3 of them died in the fire. 1 of them was put to trial later and put to death. But the film Careless Crime is kind of a meditation on that. It brings it up a lot. It talks a lot about the movie that it occurred during. Basically, it was the fire occurred during a showing of a film called The Deer, which I'm now super interested to check out.
Yeah, no, I immediately went and added it to my letterbox. I read up a little bit on it, very very briefly. Again, we did just finish watching this probably 30-40 minutes ago.
Yeah, super recently. But it's really interesting. This movie, so Careless Crime is in and of itself like a kind of self-referential title as well, because in this movie, there's kind of three concurrent plot lines, and one of the plot lines is this movie that is playing diegetically in this movie, which is going to get hard to explain with words verbally really quickly here.
Yeah, it is definitely a film which, very similar to Close Up, is interested in sort of looking at the ways fiction and reality blend, because the cinema definitely very interested in it. But it goes even further in that it is a fictional movie that has a movie within the movie that is also called Careless Crime, that also talks about the fire during the showing of the deer. And within that film is a scene in which they watch a scene from the movie The Deer, and we, the audience, watch like them watching it, while also the audience that we're like is in the real film that we're watching is watching that scene on screen.
It's a lot. I really fucking love this movie. This movie did a lot of really cool shit. Being kind of a meditation on that history, the movie, the way that it explores it is super interesting. Jay, I know that I'm sure that you'd well, I'm absolutely certain that you noticed that the movie kind of hits you over the head with it, but like there's a lot of scenes where they where characters are kind of repeating themselves, and it gives this general sort of impression of like history repeating itself. Like at the very beginning of the movie, the character says that he committed some crime, some arson, like 4 years ago, and the guy mishears him and says, "Oh, 40 years ago," and he has to like correct him.
Which is a great line, because he's like, 40 years. He's like, "You're not that old." And he's like, no, like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was intentional, because I think him saying 40 years, like him mishearing it as 40 years ago, puts it within the timeline of the original fires.
Yeah.
So the guy mistakes him as the original like person who set the fires for a second. It's there's that. There's also the missile within the film.
Right.
Is said to be a missile that both had fallen like 40 years ago, like a little under 40 years ago, and then just somehow has like reappeared, even though like that was in the past.
Yeah.
Like they say that the bomb had been detonated and that it was already taken care of, but they're like, well, there's no other way that this bomb could have come from. So clearly this is that bomb from 40 years ago, and we just never discovered it again until now.
Yeah. There's lots of really cool stuff. There's also like there's a bunch of interplay in how kind of the movie itself influences like things that are happening in, you know, the real world of the film. There's like in the movie Careless Crime, within the movie Careless Crime, these two characters show this army guy this like magic trick with like a yellow piece of paper, where it just kind of magically appears in one of his pockets. And then later on, that same yellow piece of paper appears in like the main character of this film's pocket, like outside of the context of that movie. So it's clear that this film has like a lot to say about like the role of cinema and how it influences and how it kind of reflects our past and, you know, shapes our perception of the past and things like that. The other thing that I quickly wanted to point out is that I don't know if you noticed this, but the main character, every time the main character is on screen, the main character of this movie is kind of a pyromaniac. He's actually taking pills for his pyromania. And like the very first scene of the movie is him like running into like sanctions. He can't get his medication. Almost every single shot that he's in, there's some sort of light shining directly into the camera so brightly that it like blows out the frame, and it's like super white.
Yeah,
you can barely
I noticed that.
I'm still kind of piecing together like what my personal interpretation of that is. I do think like that's kind of meant to mimic sort of like projection, and how he in fact is projecting his own sort of, I guess, attitudes, frustrations, and is in turn blinded by them. But I don't know. That's me kicking rocks around. That's just me thinking out loud here, because there's obviously a lot of ways to interpret that.
Yeah, no, I definitely took it as like it's him constantly doing that, and it's also specifically is coming from behind him, and
Yeah.
so it's not just like there's a projection thing about it. It always feels like pretty much like because there's like a recurring theme of when they're in the theater of people in the theater interacting with and interfering with each other and like interrupting the movie in some way for each other. And so
Hmm.
I took that as like almost being like trying to recreate the feeling of like somebody standing up and like the getting in front of the projection that like they're as they're like crossing your lap to like go to the theater. There's
Oh
definitely a few
yeah.
moments of the film feels like it's trying to stress you out and make you think about the possibility of the fact that you are in a theater with possibly several hundred other people.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of moments where it feels like the movie is almost trying to like freak you out and be like, hey, wouldn't it be like, hey, if this happened in your theater, like, would you be able to get out?
Yeah.
Uh, and I feel like that's like I feel like that's the thing that I found really interesting about it is that unlike a lot of films I've seen that sort of talks about like cinema and like what influence does cinema have on society and whatnot, it's usually a very like uniform relationship. Like it sort of imagines this idea of you, the individual in the theater watching this movie and that experience, but like just that as if the theater is otherwise empty. And I feel like you see that a lot in like the imagery that is used in a lot of movies like that, where it's usually a person in a theater that is essentially devoid of anyone else. But in
Right.
this
Right.
one, the emphasis is on theaters is crowded, like very crowded, very like social spaces. And I thought that was like really cool. Like the just seeing characters like smoking in a movie theater and that being and like talking to each other like there's not like a movie going on at the same time.
Yeah. I feel like cities should have like smoking sections. You know what I mean? Like the smoking district
Yeah.
where you can
Oh
smoke
yeah, yeah,
inside.
yeah, yeah. The cool kids district.
um yeah, no, that was like a really really important part of it. Yeah, the movie also does so much with its own like kind of structure and the way that it, like tries to tell the story. Probably one of my favorite scenes is actually in the middle of kind of in the middle of the movie, towards the end a little bit. Uh, there was this part where the camera kept kind of circling around and like following different characters. It was actually a scene that takes place in Careless Crime, the movie within the movie Careless Crime. Uh,
Yeah.
that's not going to get easier as this episode keeps going, but stick with it. Um, but yeah, they're kind of like circling around and they're having like all of these intersecting discussions, and instead of like cutting at any point or cutting back, the actors just kind of keep running through the same dialogue over and over and over and over again, like they're kind of stuck in the same scene. Uh,
it it's so cool too because it also makes the timeline of these conversations like very difficult to follow because
yeah,
characters will like break the sequence of events that we like saw in order to essentially restart the conversation tree so that you can follow like okay but where did the conversation from this person's point of view go,
yeah, yeah,
and then it all
absolutely.
just like loops back into itself, but then when it loops into itself at that end it's like oh actually that's the conclusion of all of these dialogues.
Yeah. And it's a really important scene because it's super confusing, and everything just kind of like everything kind of just flows into each other. But they're the whole time they're like kind of shooting the shit, and they're like talking about they're trying to figure out like a character's name in the movie and like who that character was. And like they're trying to remember who's who because a character has like multiple names, but they're trying to figure out if it's the same character. Um, which in the context of a movie that is about a historical event seems pretty loaded.
Yeah, yeah.
Like maybe trying to say something about how the complexity of like stories being kind of retold and retold, and how like this obviously like it's a huge tragedy, um to have to meditate on like 400 fucking people. Holy shit. uh but
and is like a huge part of your like the country's history that it's being filmed in,
yeah,
because it is like recognized as like a tragedy that essentially led towards like more political more political unrest and tragedy because of that.
right.
It's very much so. It's like take any like terrorist attack within like your own country essentially, and imagine that it occurred in a cinema, and then someone trying to make a movie about it like 40, 50 years later, basically, or not
Yeah.
about it, but like mediating on it, and it's like ongoing effects today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's an important scene also where the main character is kind of going through this like cinema history museum, and the museum doesn't really like play up like, oh, this was a good thing, blah blah blah. The museum has like a really really neutral tone about the about the event itself, about it's referred to historically as a crime,
Yeah.
but then the museum is like, oh, but it precipitated this, revolution of 1979, which was our glorious revolution, and brought us to where we are today. And the revolution was great. Which like that has to be just such a complex thing to sit with. And I mean, I don't even, there's plenty of things in American history that are also like that are just like insanely terrible thing precipitated, some sort of like extreme amount of change in a short time. But those are just very kind of interesting things to meditate on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's and I feel like it does it really like well. I mean, admittedly, I don't have the kind of point of reference. Honestly, like to sort of mentally translate it in my mind, I was kind of treating it as like almost as like, okay, I will make this the American version of something like, say, like a mass shooting here.
Sure,
Because
yeah.
that's kind of the vibe that I got from it, was that it was that sort of thing of just like there's like that scene where one of the characters is talking about like there's been 30 cinema fires this year, and they're arguing over the numbers of it and whether or not like you can trust the reports about it. And so I was like, okay, so like cinema fire, like maybe in Iran that has the same like public consciousness fixation as like mass shootings, basically.
Yeah. Although the unfortunate thing about that comparison is that if the fire happens in a theater in Iran, you get a revolution. If a shooting happens in a theater in America, you don't get midnight showings anymore, and then nothing else happens.
Yeah, you don't get midnight showings, and we get a documentary by Michael Moore.
What the fuck is wrong with this country? What is like the deal?
I mean, I will say the one thing is that like with regards to conspiracy theorists, whenever they have their conspiracies about like mass shootings and stuff, I have a hard time buying them, because I'm like, I don't know if the government's attempt was to affect change of them, at some point they're gonna be like, it's not working.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing.
Like it's pretty clearly like not working. Like nothing has changed.
Yeah. One small thing about the movie, the movie within a movie, Careless Crime, which is within the movie Careless Crime, has a lot of really, really cool stuff in it. A lot of like really sort of strange, like magical realism stuff. Things kind of tend to repeat. There's like a lot of, there's just a lot of magical realism. One really, really interesting effect that I actually am not sure how they did. I'd be interested to, I don't know, maybe find that out, or maybe not. But early in the movie, they kind of hint toward a stream where you can't see your reflection, and there's all this great subtext of the main character of the movie within the movie Careless Crime, not being able to see his own reflection because he did something horrible in the past. He ran over his family in a car, so he can't look in the rear view mirror, which. Some subtle things going on there with the rest of the movie, but they arrive at this stream, and there's like this story about how the stream doesn't reflect anything, and it's controlled by like this witch basically, and I was like, oh, that's like a fun little bit of flavor text, but they actually show it, and sure enough, this water does not have a reflection. How did they do that?
And then it gets a reflection.
Yeah.
Like that was the effect of it that drew attention to me, because I was willing to accept that it was like, okay, whatever, they did some cool trick, but then like this director famously, like, the thing that got me interested in watching this was that they'd done a movie called Fish and Cat, yeah, which is like an Iranian slasher horror film that's all done in one shot. And
Cool.
also, like, but it's like also done in one shot, like over the course of like a lot of time, and it's supposed to be really, really good. And the thing that got me interested, and the thing that I noticed in this, is that there's definitely a level of, like, this guy loves his really long shots that make you go, wait, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And he does them really well. And that is one of them. Is it's at the end of the film, there's the story he's also told about the woman catching the missile in her sack as it blew across, like after seeing it go across the reflection of the lake. And then he gets this box that he unlocks and there's a sack inside of it, and he opens it and it makes the sound of like a missile coming out, but he doesn't see it. And then the camera kind of like follows the path of like where it would have gone out across the river, and there's no reflection. And then like a rock drops into it, and then like suddenly like everything that is like surrounding it is now reflected in the water.
Yeah.
And this is all done in like one shot. And I saw that and I was like, how did you do that?
How? Fucking how? It's actually
how did you do that?
Yeah, it's extremely impressive. Yeah, just a lot of stuff like that. And a lot of little cute things, like lines that they say in the movie, within the movie Careless Crime, and then the movie Careless Crime, that like get repeated outside of it. You know, like the same kind of small talk and like conversations happen within and outside of the movie. Yeah, really, really, really cool, really effective. What did you think of the crazy puppet costume that's on the poster?
Wait. I think I know what you're talking about, but I haven't seen the poster, so let me look at the poster.
Yeah.
Or at least I haven't seen that. Oh, that guy!
Yeah.
Okay, that's like another thing, is like there's some things that I'm like, I saw that guy and I'm like, is this like, because like he sees this guy at the start of the film, but it looks like it's a person in a costume. But then at the end of the film, it does not appear to be a person in a costume. It appears to be an actual puppet man.
A slender man, if you will.
a slender puppet man. So I'm very unsure. Like I definitely took that guy as being kind of like there's a level of so a big thing in this film is definitely the idea of films as illusions.
Yeah.
And those illusions as being ways of manipulating you. And so I kind of took that as, because there's a lot of stuff in this film that's not subtle, as like literally like you are the puppet to the puppet master that you can't see, because he looks like a marionette. So it feels like he is like an actor being controlled by a character you don't see on a screen. Here is a puppet who's being controlled by a character you don't see on screen.
Right.
Because there's like within the film, the two girls who are screening deer are constantly doing these illusions, and there's even a line about how they have a rope that appears like it's going into the sky, and one of the guys is like, yeah, I went up to it, and it's like not. It's just like an elaborate like series of like pullers and levies. They're very, very good at like messing with us and making us think that there's more going on than there is.
Yeah. Which that kind of comes to a head at the end of the movie when the puppet is like showing him the missile as seemingly as kind of a way to draw a comparison between the act of like the arson and the act of like dropping a missile.
Oh yeah, and even like, I wonder if, because like I mean, the title of the film, obviously Careless Crime, and the guilt of the character within the film about his careless crime. And the way in which the film kind of opens with like all of these facts about the original cinema burning, where it's basically like the cinema burning was as awful as it was because of just a series of like extremely unfortunate carelessness.
Yeah,
which we also like almost immediately start seeing being recreated in this film to like stress the audience out. Like one of the first things that we see before that explanation of everything that's going on is that the theater that the film largely takes place in we see that it's just been renovated, and they're talking about how it's not up to code, and how he's like, well, I don't care if it's not up to code. It's like bigger now. I think he even says it goes from 400 to 700 seats. The implication being that like there's even more people who can die now.
God. Yeah, and there's all of this like, there's all this talk about like, oh, it's too hard for us to, you know, to mediate fights when people come in the front door, and it's like after we let people in and blah blah blah, which like, you know, relatable. And there's also like this great like really funny line and scene about, or where one of the characters is like, yeah, I called in the arson threat. It was fake. I just didn't want people to come because this actor's really popular and I don't want to work more. Which
that
also
was such a funny scene. That was such a good scene. It was just him admitting that like, yeah, I faked an arson threat because I didn't want to work that. I didn't want to work that show.
Really relatable.
Also, tapping head noted. I will remember that.
Yeah, no, this will come in handy in the future. Yeah, that stuff is all really, really on the nose. It's also really funny when, kind of toward the end of the movie, one of the theater workers comes out and he obviously doesn't notice that the lobby is covered in like paint thinner.
Gas. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, because they even mentioned earlier, he goes, the paint thinner that they're using has like a thing in it to kind of cover up the smell, but like he definitely doesn't notice that there's like shit everywhere.
Yeah, it's like wet.
Yeah, that's why it's like I'm excited to go back and rewatch this at some point, because it took me a bit to kind of like figure out where it was going, because all of these stories kind of start. There's like several different threads that are going on that don't seem connected until they all start to converge.
Right. Yeah.
For a bit, I even thought that I had like tricked myself into thinking that the movie within the movie was a movie, because that plot line doesn't start until like, that's like, I want to say like an hour in, so almost halfway through the film is when they start the movie within a movie that is called Careless Crime. And I was like, wait, is this the movie that they were discussing earlier, or is this the movie, is this kind of the movie they were discussing earlier, but also these are events that are literally happening somewhere else? And it wasn't until like near the end that like it kind of confirms that like, yes, these events that we have been showing you are a film that is occurring within the film that you were watching.
Yeah. Whereas like,
which continues into that like the film very much so playing around with like the ideas of like what is and isn't fiction, what is like how films influence the real world.
Yeah, so interesting. This movie, I mean, it's like 2 hours 15. It's really, really, really dense. There's a whole lot of characters. I actually kind of like, there's one of the like the third plot line is kind of about all of these like workers and like students, and it doesn't really focus on anyone in particular. There's one character name I remember is Layla, which is also referenced in Careless Crime, the movie within a movie, Careless Crime. And like a lot of that stuff, like I definitely, I don't want to say that it's like not important, but it's definitely like it kind of feels a lot like set dressing. It feels like it's kind of setting up, you know, the sort of general like life circumstances of everybody. But that stuff was super convoluted. There's a character who's trying to like get rid of a bunch of movie posters, and there's like a plot. I don't know. I wasn't really. It was moving pretty quickly, so I wasn't really following that aspect of it like super closely. But there is definitely a whole shitload of fuck, in the words of the Angry Video Game Nerd, going on in this movie.
Careless Crime? They should have taken better care of it. It's my Angry Video Game Nerd impression.
Yeah. Buffalo diarrhea dog shit coming out of my ass. It was what this movie wasn't.
Yeah, no, this movie was buffalo diarrhea dog shit coming into my heart. It's also, despite being 2 hours and 19 minutes, I think only the second longest film that we will be watching.
Yeah. So we've got a slate of other movies for the Chicago Film Festival that we're watching. One of them appears to be almost 3 hours long, which is gonna be great.
Very excited about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking up to see if Careless Crime had gotten picked up for distribution here yet. It is something that is like being currently shopped around at a pretty decent number of international film festivals, and a lot of film festivals are going online this year. So, you know, check out to see if there's any that are local to you that like maybe you can sign up for. And if not, hopefully this will get picked up for more Western distribution, because right now the only ones I'm seeing is that it's getting picked up for distribution in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland.
Well, to our German, Austrian, and Swiss listeners, please check out this movie. And if any of our U.S. listeners find distribution, please check out this movie. It's pretty long, but it's pretty damn worth it. It's if you're a fan of kind of you know, snaky narrative, you know, the whole kind of time vortex stuff in storytelling, this movie is definitely for you.
And if you get a chance to find a copy of Fish and Cat, it's, I know, very hard to find, apparently. Apparently check that out. I've heard nothing but extremely good about it. I'm actually currently, having now seen one of his other films, elbowing my friend to be like, okay, listen, I know you must have hunted down a copy of this at some point, because this is one of your favorite Iranian films, so please share it with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super interested now that I've watched this, especially given that it's a horror, something horror by this director. That sounds fucking awesome.
I did like the sort of like random incidental characters that were like sort of surrounding the theater itself, like the couple in the theater where she's like, oh, the guy next to me, his thigh is touching my thigh, and he's like, oh, okay. She's like, but don't say anything about it, I don't want you to make a scene. And he's like, okay. And then he like looks over and he's like, that dude's like super old. And she's like, well, that just makes it worse. And I'm like, well, if you don't want me to say anything, then like you can say something. And she's like, I'll say something if it's a problem. And he's like, okay. And then just like sits for like a second and then literally does the like, I just think it's funny that like gets mad at him that he like didn't pick a fight with this old man.
Yeah. It's super funny. And he keeps bringing up that the guy looks like an older version of him.
Yeah, he's like that dude looks like and it's funny because I don't think they even show the guy. Like, I think when the camera's panning down to them, it moves too quickly, so you don't get a good look at this guy. So you were just watching this like couple like quietly argue about this old man sitting next to them and whether or not he looks like a 20-year-old, like a plus 20 years older version of the boyfriend, and also whether or not the boyfriend should like threaten to kick his ass.
Yeah. Yep, there's a lot of really good like little interactions and stuff in the movie as well. So, you know, don't just come for the timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly shit. That timey-wimey shit.
Yeah,
that
come for the
goofy shit.
Come for the film commentary. Stay because it's a really good movie and you should watch it.
Yeah. Like Careless Crime, we've got a bunch of films from the Chicago Film Festival in our docket. If you live in the Midwest, you can join us. And if you don't live in the Midwest, I guess you're shit out of luck.
I guess there's absolutely no way that, for example, ExpressVPN
who's not sponsoring us, by the way.
Who has a couple dozen servers in Chicago and is currently... how much is it right now? You don't even have a thing on your website. Why would you not on your front page tell me how much your product is? Okay, you know what? Don't use ExpressVPN.
Yeah, no, fuck that. Find a VPN that works for you.
Well, listen. I'm gonna lay this down. I don't want to be like screw the film festivals, but I feel like we're not big enough that we're fucking over film festivals on this. And film festivals have long like championed on being fairly exclusionary by both price point and access point. Because of COVID, you can just use a VPN and just buy tickets at a film festival and just go watch the movie whenever you want, because they have to give it to you as a streaming product now.
And thankfully, you don't have to worry about theater capacity or fire exits. Or anything like that. At least I hope not.
And you can smoke indoors while you're watching it if you really want to.
Yeah, welcome to the virtual world, bitch. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we're helping. Because it's, you still got to pay for admission. So if you're flying in from some crazy part of the world on some magical VPN school bus, then so be it.
I guess to an extent, be fair. I think from what I saw, due to distribution rights, it sounds like a lot of them do actually have like air quotes limited tickets. But it's kind of like I assume how. So with the Chicago Film Festival, only a couple of the films are region locked, and I assume that just has something to do with like licensing agreements.
Yeah, well, we're elbowing our way forward in line here.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like the amount of people who listen to us is a very good amount. I'm not gonna poo poo on that, but it's not enough that we're gonna like screw over the film festival industry. Just
yeah.
Come on,
to smuggle people in.
We all know. Listen. We now actually have the time ability to watch film festival movies without being rich, or it being our literal job to go see film festival movies.
Yeah. So fuck you, fuck the film industry, fuck you, Hollyweird.
So take advantage of it. And happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. From us to you. I'll try to have this up before the Saturday stream of Plan 9. If I didn't miss it, then come join us on Saturday the 17th. We're going to be streaming Plan 9 on our YouTube channel. Yeah. If I did miss it, go watch the highlight reel, the VOD or whatever you want to call it. I'll probably put up at some point. But yeah, that's going to be really, really fun.
And we're actually doing it partially for our Throws It Back special.
Yeah.
Which is going to be it's going to be about Plan 9 because people voted for it, and while we were looking into it, we found out, hey, Plan 9 is public domain. So we can just do that if we want.
Yeah. Fuck it. Fuck the rules, even though this is specifically not against any rules.
Yeah, no, it's actually fairly permissible material. But all the same, come join us.
Yeah, and keep it locked for more Chicago Film Festival flicks. We've got a pretty loosey-goosey list of shit that we're going to be checking out for the next few weeks. So we're definitely going to be updating you guys on our choices, and let us know what you're watching in the commentaronies, or on our. On our what? Are we announcing that? Is that a thing?
I assume so, yeah.
All right, yeah. Fuck it. Join our Discord.
Our Discord. Yeah, there's gonna be a link down below.
Yeah. We've got some patron exclusive channels, but it's gonna be open for everybody. Fuck it. Come hang out.
I'm Jay Bearhat.
I am Baru.
As Foam Critters, thank you for supporting us.
Yay. Bye. Bye.